Hi. Firstly, I'd like to apologise for the delay in the release of this video. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I was trying to get perfect audio for you guys of my reading, but to be honest, in my house, 3 children, 2 dogs, there's never a time where it's quiet. So come outside in the garden. I apologise for any noise you can hear in the background. I'll try my best to edit background noises out, but at least we won't have screaming kids and dogs and cats and stuff in the background, okay? So this is the book reading for Quantum Sorcery, The Science of Chaos Magic by David Smith. It's a great book. It certainly helped me understand a lot concepts and ideas that I was thinking about anyway. This kind of just helped solidify it and put it into better words than I was coming up with, but it helps to describe a lot. Okay, here we go. It's 10 chapters. I'll read the foreword first and then the introduction, then we'll get into the meat of it, okay? Let's get started. Foreword. There are many approaches to magic. Over the decades that I have personally studied various systems, I have come across everything from completely faith-based magic to empiric scientific approaches. Yet, I was constantly beset with one question throughout my younger life that wouldn't begin to be resolved until the late 1980s. What makes the magic work? When I came across the disciplines within chaos magic theory, things began to fall into place. It was a practical approach to magic that went beyond the limitations of ordinary science, yet refusing to get lost in the airy-fairy New Age belief systems, even though the magic might well draw from either extreme or formulate a result. Harnessing the ultimate power of the human mind as the basis of magic makes sense with even an elementary concept of quantum physics. Somewhere along my journey, I began to correspond with David Smith. I believe this began in the chaosmagic.com community, where I used to spend much more time before life as a film producer tore me away from too many ideal hours of internet surfing. That too was an act of chaos, although my correspondence may be less frequent. Keeping some contact with those with whom I have discussed concepts of magic reminds me that there are others who share my question. Dave writes in the introduction to Quantum Sorcery, in very similar words to my own from all those years ago, what is the underlying mechanism by which the will causes physical change in the universe? Oddly, despite my interest in chaos magic, I have never set foot in a physics class. The concepts make perfect sense to me when applied to magic. I rely on people like Dave to investigate the links to traditional science. My studies may have taken me through chaos science and probability as well as alchemy, but a transient life has left a few gaps in my formal education which I am only motivated to fill when I find real-life application for the information. Hence my understanding of physics is largely coloured by its application to magic. It is always an honour to be asked to write a foreword for a book that you would like to have written yourself. Reading through the first section of this one is like reading the book I would wish to write if I had the time to do the research and to remember all of the materials I have studied over the years. The history of magic and the importance of the reference to the Emerald Tablet in particular is something that many young magicians seem to miss out on in these days of instant gratification and television advert-contained attention spans. A good grounding in historic information is still valuable for the magician. Even with the quick success ratio of Austin Osman Speyer's popularized sigil methods, one doesn't have to follow the methods of a historic magic or dead magicians to benefit from their example. Then of course there are the magicians still among us, the early chaos magicians like Peter J. Carroll, who began exploring the concept of Austin Osman's sphere and applying recent scientific theory to the practice of magic. Such magicians have forged new paths in modern magic, making it easier for the new magician to access workable information and to apply it to a world that is very unlike that of the historic alchemists and cavalry. With more understanding of science, there is more understanding of magic. It is when we get to the more scientific concepts behind magic in the second part of this book that I see the book that I couldn't have written. Yet the clear and concise way in which Dave Smith has explained the history and concepts of physics leave me feeling that I have definitely learned something of importance, and that it is the goal of any non-fiction book. With a higher awareness that internet chaos magic spread, I think it is time for this book. Books that do little more than rehash the writings of Peter Carroll, Timothy Leary and Robert Ann Wilson have appeared periodically since the late 1970s. I've avoided such an approach myself. Quantum Sorcery is the first book I've seen for some time that delves right into the science behind the magic and provides answers to the questions I was asking so long ago. I will make no attempt to paraphrase here, but leave the reader to savor the words of the author himself. The concepts of physics are inextricable from practical magic. Recognizing that fact has become the arena of the chaos magician. Far from being dead, chaos magic has evolved to encompass the rapidly increasing information on the modern age and the changes in society that inevitably affect the growth of magical concept and community. Parts of this book are like embracing an old friend. As I read about Lorenz and Mandelbrot, I am reminded of the ideas that stimulated my curiosity more than a decade ago when I first delved into the classic books like James Cleck's Chaos, The Magic of a New Science, and found that I was able to apply the concepts to magic. Some of the directions that internet chaos magic has travelled have interested me less, perhaps, but always there has been fresh perspective and a plethora of ideas to be found to build on the basic concepts that make the magic work. The approach of every magician is different. We draw on our own interests and experiences, but it is in understanding the basic mechanisms of magic and science that we are able to apply the experience to methods that will work for us individually. The work you are about to read may well be the only book you will ever need to accomplish this. After that, it's just a matter of practical application. Jack D. Hawkins. Introduction. What is the pattern, or the meaning, or the why? It does not do harm to the mystery to know a little more about it. Richard Feynman. Quantum sorcery is a magical system in which an individual manifests desired effects in the physical world through the exertion of will. This system makes no supposition regarding the existence or influence of any sort of external agent or higher being as the source of this capability. Rather, it is based upon the premise that the human mind causes minute changes in the behavior of subatomic particles and energy. These minute changes, directed by visualization and focused intent, cause a cascade of events to occur, which ultimately result in the manifestation of the desired effect. Quantum sorcery incorporates elements from earlier magical systems, as well as physics, mathematics, psychology, and biology. A variety of techniques of open hand magic, visualization, and repetition are used that are familiar to many magicians, but in this system, such practices are considered to be symbolic devices used for the direct manipulation of reality in the phenomenal world. In general, I use the term sorcery rather than magic to distinguish this system, which considers the will of the practitioner as the source of the power to manifest change. From systems such as Enochian and Kabbalistic magic, which typically assume that the source of power is external to the practitioner. However, as sorcery is subject of magic, a broader term will also appear throughout the text. I also use the term sorcerer to indicate a magician who performs acts of sorcery, regardless of what their gender or race may be. The origin of this project arose from a simple question that I could still not answer to my satisfaction after more than 15 years of practicing magic. What is the underlying mechanism by which the will causes physical change in the universe? In other words, given my belief that magic works, how does it work? Ultimately, I believe that the power to perform magic comes from within the human mind itself. Still, I could not explain how to bridge the gap between intense desire and actual results. As I investigated this puzzle, I began to find that more often the most pertinent materials were not books about sorcery, but about hard science such as physics and neuroscience, or social sciences such as psychology, linguistics, and semiotics. It has been said that magic is simply science that has yet to be explained, but I have come to believe that magic can be more accurately thought of as a natural extension of progression of science. Considering the etymology behind each of the words shows that science is the discipline of observation and knowledge. In contrast, magic is the discipline of influence and prediction. It is my belief that the two are more closely related than most adherents of either are usually willing to acknowledge. Many religions and magical systems with vastly differing methods of dogma seem capable of achieving the result of exerting will to cause change. Whether the process is referred to as prayer or spellcraft, this would seem to indicate that there is not a particular external force which makes these results possible, or if there is, then it is a force which is universally available to all who seek to employ it, rather than being a particular deity who only rewards those who follow a prescribed spiritual path. When the assumption of an outside agent bestowing this capability is removed, the human mind must then be considered as a likely source of this power. The principle that convinced me of this is known as Occam's razor. William of Occam, a 14th century logician and Franciscan friar, wrote Pluralitas non est ponenda sin necessitate, which translates into plurality should not be posted without necessity. I apply this to mean that the explanation for a phenomenon which requires the fewest assumptions to be made is most likely to be correct. In this framework, I theorize that within a physical universe composed of matter and energy, any force capable of manifesting an observable effect on this matter and energy must be a phenomena originating within that physical universe rather than external to it. More plainly stated, there is no need to ascribe miraculous or supernatural effects to an outside agent when they can be explained as originating from within the person or persons who desire these effects to be manifested. This book has 3 sections. The first, Fundamentals of Sorcery, provides historical background material on the practice of sorcery from the foundations of the classical world through the 21st century inheritors of this tradition. This is followed by an enumeration of some practical considerations in the practice of sorcery, including instructions on developing a personal symbol set which we'll use in later workings, as well as methods for dealing with the psychic censor, the inner voice of nagging doubt and distraction. The second section, Models of Physical Reality, resembles a science or perhaps pseudoscience text than a handbook of sorcery. In these chapters I provide a basic foundation for understanding the terminology of quantum mechanics, its principles and forces, and the attempts by physicists to construct a unified theory to reconcile their myriad of discoveries. Next, I investigate more radical theories of matter, such as the possibility that the universe and everything in it might be nothing more than a complex hologram, and the possibility that every choice made channels the decision maker into one of the nearly infinite number of different universes. In this section, I also investigate chaos theory, the mathematics of hidden patterns and relationships. This discipline is vital to the concept of quantum sorcery, regardless of which physical model is found to be the most useful, for it describes the vast effects which can be caused through the application of even minute force. The final section, Models of Mind and Manipulation, focuses on the workings of the human mind and the ways in which the mechanics of sorcery can propagate changes constructed in the mind outward into the phenomenal universe. I examine the possible ways in which all of these phenomena can be tied together to actually do the work. This includes the possibility that consciousness, like the universe, could be a holographic construction, or that the emission of measurable energy discharges from human beings could provide the required impetus to initiate a cascade of directed will. The last chapter in this section combines the principles of prior chapters into suggested practices for constructing a personally developed system of sorcery designed to provide an interface between the underlying forces that have been explored and the physical world. This system relies on techniques of visualization and projecting intent through the individual symbols which have been developed for that purpose. Although you can use quantum sorcery as a complete system in its own right, it can also be integrated with other traditions as a meta-system in which to frame them. Likewise, it can also be incorporated into even broader magical modes. It is a tool of will and transformation for use by those who are interested not only in the end but in the means as well. Chapter 1. A Chronology of Sorcery. Sorcery breaks no law of nature because there is no natural law. Hakim Bey. Although there is a great deal of science in this paradigm, this book is about sorcery. This is a term that most people have probably heard before, but might not know exactly what it means. The word sorcery dates to approximately 1300 CE Common Era and comes into the English language by the Old French word sorcière, from the Latin words sors, lots, and legere, to read. Also comes the term sortilege, which is the practice of divining the future by reading lots. Associated with this term is the vulgar Latin sortariat, meaning one who influences fate or fortune. It is interesting that even back to the origins of these words, that the act of divining the future is related to the act of influencing it. While this definition is a good start, I feel that it is not quite complete. Among the contemporary definitions that I have encountered, I feel the best attempts comes from ontological anarchist Hakim Bey in his collection T.A.Z. The Temporary Autonomous Zone. Bey describes sorcery as the systematic cultivation of enhanced consciousness or non-ordinary awareness and its deployment in the world of deeds and objects to bring about desired results. He further states that sorcery involves manipulation of symbols, which are also things, and of people who are also symbolic. That's Hakim Bey, 1985. This definition encapsulates the original, but also expands it in a way that alludes to a greater depth of meaning. Sorcery, as a practice, predates recorded history. Paradoxically, it is both the common magic of the tribal witch doctor and the closely held secret of medieval mages. It is a pragmatic form of magic in the most literal sense, which is employed for doing and changing things. One of its core components is sympathetic magic, which has been employed for millennia in the form of rituals designed to ensure good hunting, fertility, and ample rainfall for bountiful harvests. Many people may already be familiar with sympathetic magic, they just don't recognize it as such. For example, if I create a small cloth doll that looks like you, and then do everything that I can to imbue it with your properties, such as filling it with bits of your hair and nail clippings, it becomes a proxy for you. If I were to do something nasty to this doll, such as stick pins in it, then you would feel the pain. Likewise, if I surround this doll with emblems of wealth and prosperity, then wealth and prosperity will gather to the real you. Unfortunately, most people are likely more familiar with the first harmful example than the second. The fact that voodoo doll kits can be bought at mainstream bookstores illustrates that the acceptance of this principle is so universal that it has become commonplace. A wealth of material exists from the 16th through the 18th centuries on the practice of sorcery, as it was condemned side by side with accounts of witchcraft and devil worship. One treatise dating to 1587 states, "A witch is one that worketh by the devil, or by some devilish or curious art, either hurting or healing, revealing things secret, or foretelling things to come, which the devil hath devised to entangle and snare men's souls withal unto damnation. The conjurer, the enchanter, the sorcerer, the diviner, and whatsoever other sort there is, are indeed compassed within this circle." George Gifford, 1587. A later work dating to 1727 attempts to describe how these works were performed. They acted certainly from the beginning by certain mystic or concealed conjurations, such as uncouth noises and sounds, strange gestures, postures, and barbarous magic noises. And that's Daniel Defoe, 1727. As anyone who is familiar with contemporary magical practices can tell you, not a lot has changed. Sounds, gestures, and postures are still vital components to many forms of magic, and some sorcerers still invoke cause to manifest internally to the summoner, or evoke cause to manifest externally to the summoner, what many people would probably consider to be evil spirits. This is not to say that everyone who works with magic is interested in such workings, nor that those who do such workings actually believe that the entities that they are transacting with are literally evil spirits. Many believe that these entities are simply thought forms, pseudo-autonomous psychic entities willed into existence by the magician, or personified inner demons. Some magicians, however, do seek to transact with entities that some might perceive as diabolical or malevolent, But these labels are subjective and are merely projections of a culture steeped in an artificially imposed dualistic worldview. Some of these entities may come from lists of names contained in grimoires dating back hundreds of years, whereas others may come from more modern magical works, or even from popular horror fiction. It all depends on the desires and beliefs of the practitioner. Due to the efforts of many dedicated enthusiasts, many manuscripts whose ownership in the 17th century might well have condemned a sorcerer to death can now be downloaded in their entirety for free off the internet. Some of these works have been modified and expurgated as they have been passed down from their original forms through various translations and interpretations. Others have remained unchanged for more than 1,000 years. One of these is a semi-legendary source which has had a profound influence on sorcery, alchemy, and perhaps even cosmology. It is known as the Tabulus Magaradina, or the Emerald Tablets of Hermes Trismegistus. The Emerald Tablets of Trismegistus. The Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus has been an object of inspiration and study to alchemists, philosophers, and sorcerers for over 1,000 years, and if there is any truth to the legend that surrounds it, perhaps for far longer. I feel that a survey of sorcery would be incomplete if it failed to acknowledge the importance of this document and its author to the Western occult tradition. Hermes Trismegistus, or Hermes the Thrice Great, who allegedly authored the tablet, was a foundational figure in alchemy. His importance is demonstrated by the usage of the term hermetic to describe various processes relating to alchemy and the occult sciences. His name is a Greek construct, which arose when Tahuti, Thoth, the creator god of the Egyptian pantheon, was adopted into the Greek pantheon. Egyptian scribes would often append the epithet Ao, or great, 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 to Tahuti's name, in order to indicate his majesty. So the Greeks likewise appended this to the name of their equivalent deity Hermes. Hermes Trismegistus was also the purported author of the Corpus Hermeticum, a collection of Hellenic Gnostic texts. But as it was common in Egypt magical practice for individual magicians to self-identify with the god and adopt his name for their endeavours, it is likely that the body of writings attributed to him is the work of numerous anonymous individuals. That's Laurel Holmestorm, 1998. The origin of the physical tablet itself is unknown. Stories say the tablet itself was made of translucent green stone or glass, with a text similar to Phoenician characters appearing as a bas relief rather than an engraving. Numerous legends surround the creation and the identities of its various owners. One legend states that it was an antediluvian artifact created by Thoth, the priest king of Atlantis, in order to inspire the Atlantean wisdom, was preserved despite the impending destruction of that continent. The tablet was supposedly found concealed in a sacred pillar hidden near Thebes during a search initiated by the pharaoh Amenhotep IV, who is better known by the name he later adopted, Akhenaten. The legend further states that almost 1,000 years after Akhenaten's death, the tablet was found in the Great Pyramid of Giza by soldiers in service to Alexander the Great. Alexander had long sought the tablet, and once attained, he displayed it in the Great Library in the city of Alexandria. Upon Alexander's death, the location of the tablet was lost. It was discovered hidden in a cave by a Syrian named Balinas, who became better known by his Greek name Apollonius of Tyana, as a philosopher, alchemist, and Neo-Pythagorean mystic. Perhaps It is fitting that the legends mentioned Alexander, as the investigation of this topic has been comparable to unraveling a Gordian knot of misinformation, disinformation, and wild speculation. Although no credible record exists of the original tablet's supposed final resting place, there is also no account of its destruction. In the absence of the physical artifact, its text, which was widely copied and disseminated by the Alexandrian scribes, has come to be known as the Tablets. Name. Regardless of where or when the tablet originated, the text that it contained can be found in another text that dates back to the 8th century Common Era in a book called Kitab al-Sazra, the Book of Secrets by Abu Bakr Muhammad Abin Zachariah al-Razi, 864 to 930 Common Era. It was then translated into Latin as Liber Secretorium Alchemy by Constantine of Pisa in 1257 Common Era. Earlier but fragmentary portions of the tablet's contents can also be found in older sources such as the Leiden Papyrus, which dates to the 3rd century Common Era. The following is one translation of the tablet's text. The truth, certainly, truest, without untruth. What is above is likely what is below. What is below is likely what is above. The miracle of unity is to be attained. Everything is formed from the contemplation of unity, and all things come about from unity. By means of adaptation, its parents are the sun and moon. It was born by the wind and natured by the earth. Every wonder is from it, and its power is complete. Throw it upon earth, and earth will separate from fire. The impalable separated from the baleable. Through wisdom it rises slowly from the world to heaven, then it descends to the world, combining the power of the upper and the lower. Thus you will have the illumination of all the world, and darkness will disappear. This is the power of all strength. It overcomes that which is delicate and penetrates through solids. This was the means of the creation of the world, and in the future wonderful developments will be made. This is the way. I am Hermes, the threefold sage, so named because I have the three elements of all wisdom, and thus ends the revelation of the work of the stone. Idris Shah, 1964-223. Whether the tablet is thought to be the product of gods or of men is ultimately irrelevant compared to the importance of its message. What is above is like what is below. What is below is like what is above. These simple statements reflect the principle of the macrocosm and the microcosm, which is in turn the foundation of sorcery. The term macrocosm comes from the Greek words makros, large, and cosmos, world. Conversely, microcosm is the complementary term meaning small, micros, world. The principle that arises from this passage is that if a change is caused on a small scale, such as on a model or on some small portion of a large system, that the effect also manifests in the large system. The reverse is also true from the standpoint that small phenomena are representative of large phenomena. This principle is often presented through the belief that man is a microcosmic representation of some celestial creator. Although the concepts behind this idea were essential to several mystery schools of the 5th century before the Common Era, such as those of Democritus and Pythagoras, it is through the translated Arabic works containing the principles of the tablet that such ideas were revived and introduced into the sphere of European alchemy and sorcery. As in modern times, it was a common practice in the ancient world to incorporate older magical texts into new compendiums. Since this leads to errors in translation and attribution, the ultimate source of the principles contained in the Emerald Tablet will likely never be known. Fortunately, this does not reduce the importance of the text as a means of mimetic transmission. These ideas are still as applicable to magical practices today as they were when they were first set down. Although the Emerald Tablet and other works attributed to Hermes Trismegistus were most esteemed among alchemists, their influence upon other forms of magical practice is easily seen. Unfortunately, despite its shared ancestry with more structured and respectful magical forms, the practice of sorcery still has its share of detractors, not only among the pious but among those who practice magic themselves. Contemporary sorcery. What's so low about low magic? In discussions on contemporary magical practices, sorcery is often spoken of in less than glowing terms. In contrast to ceremonial or high magic, sorcery is often termed low magic, or as one author calls it, mundane black magic. That's Frater Niched 2001. So what distinguishes between and high-low magic? The answer is not entirely intuitive and is in some way quite arbitrary. Although there is no universal definition as to exactly what magic itself is, Aleister Crowley provided a concise definition that has been frequently cited, analysed and repeated. Crowley wrote that magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will, and that's Aleister Crowley, 1929. This is a fairly encompassing statement that practitioners of wildly diverse magical traditions can usually agree upon. However, from this common ground, there are likely as many ways to classify magical workings as there are magicians. From a sampling of the myriad sources available, we will try to construct a general description of how others have classified them, and then I will present the case that such classifications are ultimately irrelevant. Most systems attempt to classify magic based on what purpose it is used for and in what way it is accomplished. Essentially, magic is referred to as white if the purpose of working it is to achieve a connection to the magician's holy guardian angel. This supposed angel is considered by some, including myself, to be an allegory of the higher self. Others believe that it is literally a divine messenger sent from some etheric paradise. This magic seeks to uplift the human spirit into the realm of the divine, and is frequently, although not always, couched in the symbolism of the God of Abraham, Yod-Heh Vod-Heh. As such, this type of magic generally presupposes that there are external incarnate deities which may be contacted to petitioned by the magician. This type of magic is also referred to by some the right-hand path. At the opposite end of the magical spectrum, but still frequently structured and dogmatic, is the black magic. This form is typically assumed to utilize evil spirits, demons, or other denizens of the netherworld, as well as names and symbols contained in the grimoires and manuscripts previously mentioned. These entities are brought forth and commanded to do the bidding of their summoner, which can include such tasks as imparting information, influencing events, or sowing misfortune on their master's behalf. This type of magic is also referred to as the left-hand path. In some limited views, there is only black and white with nothing in between. Other methods of classification acknowledge that, like almost everything else, magic is a continuum that cannot be so easily categorized. These more comprehensive systems include yet a third category, grey magic. As the name implies, this is neither white nor black. This form of magic is used to benefit the magician rather than to uplift his or her spirit to the divine realms without the implied use of evil entities or actions. One author has also proposed that the term off-white for this particular style of magic. That's Peter Carroll, 1995. With this tripartite system of classification, I propose that most of the intentions of workings in sorcery would fall largely within the confines of grey magic, with occasional forays into the black end of the continuum. There is no inherent law or of retribution to be found in most forms of sorcery. The exact nature of sorcerous work, in terms of good and evil and right and wrong, are left up to the ethics of the individual sorcerer. The belief that what goes around comes around is already entrenched in a great many systems of human culture and socialization, so there is no need for the universe to keep score as to who has been naughty or nice. The designation of any magical system as either white or black also presupposes the acceptance of the idea that some acts and thoughts are inherently good or evil. This is an overly simplistic viewpoint. All activities within the realm of human experience are relative to the cultures and situations which contain them. Although some practices have attained forbidden status across enough cultures as to appear nearly universal, every person who chooses to take up the practice of sorcery must make their own decisions as to what constitutes appropriate actions for them in their circumstances, in any given moment. Those who cannot bear the thought of such responsibility might want to reconsider engaging in the practice, for with it comes the realization that every mind has within it the capability to contemplate the full gamut of actions, from the atrocious to the sublime. As I mentioned previously, sorcery has traditionally been considered the practice of less developed cultures. Fortunately, through the works of a number of 20th century authors and explorers, it has emerged as a practical system of magical working in the West. One of the foremost of these authors was English artist and magician Austin Osman Spare. Austin Osman Spare was, if nothing else, an unapologetic sorcerer. He felt that faith and religion had no place in magic, and his dislike of ceremonial magicians was intense. Regarding the latter, he wrote, "These magicians, whose insincerity is their safety, are but the unemployed dandies of the brothels. Their practices prove their incapacity. They have no magic to intensify the normal, the joy of a child or healthy person, none to invoke their pleasure or wisdom from themselves." Spare conceived of a transcendental primal force which he named Kia. Similar to the Tao he wrote, the Kia, which can be expressed by conceivable ideas, was not the external Kia which burns up all belief, but is the archetype of self, the slavery of mortality. That's Austin Osman Spare, 1913. To unlock the power of this Kia, Spare created a magical system which used sigils, which are statements of desire distilled into symbols for transmission to the subconscious mind, by combining the letters of the statement into a non-linguistic symbol. He energized these sigils through the use of ecstatic states achieved by hyperventilation, by his death posture, and orgasm. Through this state of vacuity, which he termed nether, he stated that the capability to attempt the impossible becomes known. Spare produced a number of written books in addition to his paintings. but as he demonstrated in Anathema of Zos in 1924, he eventually became disillusioned with his contemporaries and withdrew into relative seclusion. It was not until 1948 that he began writing for public consumption again. That's Jack D. Hawkins, 96. Spear died in 1956, leaving his unpublished papers to his friend Kenneth Grant. For several decades, Spear's ideas on sorcery remained largely dormant. It was not until the late 1970s that the current he had began would resurge again through the efforts of a small group of English sorcerers. Chaos magic emerges. In November 1974, a number of London magicians began meeting in what has come to be called the Stoke Newington Sorcerers. Among this group was Peter Carroll. Through Kenneth Grant's books, Carroll became interested in the works of Austin Osman Spare. Carroll, inspired by Spare's techniques, created a new type of magic, chaos magic. Through his writings, which were later published as a book, Liber Null and Psychonaut, Carroll presented a magical system independent of dogma and encouraged the use of whatever symbolic systems most appealed to the magician. Part of his system included the revisualization and clarification of Spare's techniques of sigillization. Although the details of this period of magical revival are too expansive to a topic to go here, you can assemble a reasonable history of this period of magical revival from various online articles and archived message boards posts regarding the subject. Chaos magic is a free-form magical paradigm which is practiced in as many ways as there are magicians who employ it. The adoption of temporary belief structures, the use of mathematical formulas and rituals, and the creation and empowerment of thought forms or servitors to perform desired tasks are several of the more commonly encountered ideas in this system. In later years, additional aspects such as the invocation of pop culture icons and the inclusion of horror fiction pantheons as usable god forms have also been included under the aegis of this type of magic. Likely classical sorcery, chaos magic focuses on achieving desired results rather than following a prescribed method for achieving them. The phrase "fake it till you make it" and "nothing is true, everything is permanent, everything is permitted" are representative of its tenets. Practitioners of other forms of magic, particularly those who favour a great deal of hierarchy and structure, have frequently attacked the validity of chaos magic and its advocates, but its persistence indicates that it does work and produces results for its users. One commentator declared in 1998 that the chaos current was officially dead, and that was Joel Viraco in 2002. The declaration seems to have been premature. Chaos's magic didn't die, it simply changed from being the practice of a few small groups of isolated individuals to being a more widespread and slightly diluted practice, distributed over a far wider area, such as the life cycle of any underground movement. Growth of the internet facilitated greater communication among magicians in widely dispersed geographic areas, which helped to expand the body of work in chaos magic. Practitioners coordinated online rituals which spanned continents, and magical working groups formed with members never meeting face to face. The adaptive principles of chaos magic became ideally suited to this medium. Some magicians have explored the relationship between computers and magic to an advanced degree, even constructing programs which are designed to do spells in their own right. Summary. Sorcery is a magical system which relies on the attainment of altered states and the manipulation of symbols to achieve desired results. It encompasses the use of sympathetic magic, which is the belief that larger systems or entities can be influenced by performing actions on a smaller simulacrum. This principle reflects in the writings of the pseudo-legendary Hermes Trismegistus, contained on the Emerald Tablet, which states what is above is like what is below, what is below is like what is above. Although this barraged by many ceremonial magicians and condemned as black magic by the church, sorcery has progressed over time from a secretive and socially dangerous activity into a far more mainstream practice. The increasing rate at which information has become available to those who seek it, whether through printed material or by electronic means, has contributed greatly to this phenomenon, as has wider social acceptance of non-dogmatic belief systems. The work of Austin Osman Spare were inspirational to the creation of chaos magic as a contemporary manifestation of many of the concepts which originated in classical sorcery. Despite being declared dead, chaos magic has continued to adapt and evolve into a far wider phenomenon. It persists largely due to the very reason for which it is criticized: flexibility, adaptation, and the rejection of the concept of ultimate truth. Chapter 2. Practical Considerations in Sorcery. Belief can structure reality. Peter Carroll. Sorcery, like all forms of magic, is a tool. It is not an ideology or a religion. It is a method that gives users the ability to gain some form of control over the phenomenal universe. By this I mean the perceivable domain of physical matter which can be observed by others, as opposed to the speculative internal reality which is intrinsic to each human mind. Not every magical working produces results that are visible to someone other than the one who performed it. But if no externally perceptible results are ever generated, then the activity might more accurately be labelled as creative visualization or self-programming rather than sorcery. Changes do not come casually, it only comes through intent and intensity. Many people can desire and envision change, but a far smaller number have the will and awareness to actually externalize their vision and make it manifest. This chapter presents a number of concepts to help facilitate the development of this ability. Energy loss in magical operations. It is not enough to understand the principles of magic, nor to believe in the mechanisms by which it is performed. One cannot use undisciplined desire alone to change reality to fit their needs. This understanding and will must still be translated into the desire effects via some practical method. Were this not the case, then anyone who desired could freely alter reality on a whim and a wave. The practices such as alchemy and magic would never have emerged in the first place. In sorcery, as in other magical disciplines, the term energy is often used but is seldom well defined. From a physical standpoint, energy is nothing more than the capacity to do work. It is a measure of the capability to change a given system from a starting condition to a desired ending condition. In this case, I am using the term to represent the focused intent of the sorcerer. The work that this energy is being applied to do is to achieve the results of a magical operation. In later chapters, I introduce another form of energy to which the following principles also apply, but for now, this abstracted definition will suffice. In general, there is a direct relationship between the amount of energy invested in a magical operation and how much that operation can accomplish. Unfortunately, it must be assumed that only a fraction of the total energy invested in producing a desired result will ultimately be brought to bear on the task. If we operate under the assumption that the laws of physics govern the phenomenal universe, as well as assume that magic is performed by affecting energy within this universe, then we can say that these laws apply to magic as well. Unfortunately, there is no known process which allows a perfect transfer of energy. Some of it is inevitably lost during transmission and application. A study of the laws of thermodynamics, motion and mechanical work can provide some insight as to how much energy may be lost before it can be put to use. Not all of these laws apply, but there are many analogies that can be made. For example, it is my observation that consensus reality acts as a force of inertia and resistance against causing changes in the system. Consensus reality is a term popularized by philosopher and humorist Robert Anton Wilson to describe the average reality experienced and reinforced by a given group of people in a specific time and place. The collective consciousness of all other brains in proximity to the sorcerer, even without directed will, comprises a formidable barrier which must be overcome in order to manipulate reality. There is some threshold energy which must be exceeded. Narrowing the focus of intent can help overcome this limitation of initial attempts, but met with too much resistance. Counteracting energy loss. One of the ways to make additional energy available for when it is needed is to invest into a physical object. Talisman, amulets, and fetishes are common in many magical systems, and quantum sorcery is no different. What is different is the way that such objects are believed to function. It is true that these items may be acting simply as a focal point for magical energy, but it may also be that these items function in the same way as batteries do for electrical energy. In this same respect, a sigil would be conceptualized as something more akin to a capacitor, in that it releases its energy in a short burst rather than a slow trickle. From a different standpoint, the build-up of energy can also be considered to occur purely within the subconscious of the sorcerer, and that the physical tools and symbols used for ritual are only triggers to direct its expenditure. This is in effect a trick played on the self, taking advantage of the adage that belief forms reality in this realm. Within this model, an association is created between the physical object or symbol and the availability of greater power for the sorcerer's use than could otherwise be wielded. With this understanding, any object or symbol may be employed for magical purposes. Due to the growth of the online commerce, many occult paraphernalia can now be obtained in areas of the world where these items were formerly difficult or impossible to find. Even if such items are not absolutely necessary, it is true that the appropriate trappings, dress, props can help create a ritual mind space, but the lack of these things should also not be a cause for limitation or failure. If such items are needed, it is far better to fabricate them oneself, if possible. The act of designing and creating a dagger, staff, or other magical tool creates a stronger connection between the sorcerer and the tool than simply purchasing it. Consequently, the stronger the personal connection to the tool, the more potent the tool becomes. The process of investing personal energy into a physical object, whether self-made or purchased, can be as elaborate or as simple as the sorcerer wishes it to be. If desired, a sorcerer can create elaborate consecration rituals for this purpose, but the simple act of holding an object, breathing on it, or making it with blood, saliva, or sexual fluid can also suffice. Manipulating symbols. Being able to manipulate symbols in all of their forms is one of the core components of sorcery. To this end, one of the useful things that a sorcerer can do is to create a set of symbols that have personal meaning for use in magical workings. Austin Spare called this system, which he constructed through automatic drawing, the sacred alphabet. Although it has become better known as the alphabet of desire, by creating such an alphabet, the symbols have only the specific meanings which the subconscious mind of the sorcerer attaches to them, and no more. The subconscious mind operates on a symbolic model rather than a linguistic one, and the images that percolate up from it to the conscious mind, if they can be recorded and deciphered, can be used in reverse fashion by the conscious mind to give instructions to the subconscious. This is essentially the same model on which sigils work. Even if the design and active input from the conscious mind, personal symbols become more attuned to the sorcerer than those derived from other sorcerers. The technique of automatic drawing can be easily learned, although practice helps achieve a consistent level of desired results. Hold a pen to paper as if drawing or writing normally. With eyes closed, take several slow, deep breaths and allow tension to drain from your body on each exhalation. Allow extraneous thoughts to drain from the mind. When working initially, do not impose any other specific thoughts or focus. Allow the pen to move freely on the paper for as long as desired. When finished, examine the resulting lines and note any which seem significant. Austin Spare wrote about his own technique. The hand must be trained to work freely and without control by practice in making simple forms with a continuous involved line without afterthought. Therefore, its intention should be just escape consciousness. The mind in a state of oblivion without desire towards reflection or purpose of materialistic intellectual suggestions is in a condition to produce successful drawings of one's personal ideas, symbolic in meaning and wisdom, as Austin Spare and Frederick Carter, 1916. Prior to beginning this process, create a list of concepts, emotions, and any other entities you want to represent in the alphabet. Before initiating an automatic drawing session, select one of the items in the list. Meditate on this item and let the subconscious express its association with the concept. While in this receptive state, start drawing. You'll use the lines and shapes generated through this exercise to form the core of the personal letter which represents the selected concept. If a particular image jumps to the conscious mind while in this process, record it adjacent to the results of the automatic drawing. You can then use these flashes of insight to add to the final rendering of the letter. There are no restrictions apart from imagination and artistic ability as to how complex or simple each letter should be. Once the alphabet is complete, you can use it as a form of magical shorthand for creating sigils, seals, or any other written magical purposes. If creating such an alphabet from scratch is not feasible or desired, then an existing set of symbols can be adopted or assembled. Select from an ideographic writing system such as runes, kanji, or hieroglyphs as the basis for the creation of a personal alphabet, but it might be more difficult to connect with than a personal set. I have also found that existing icons and symbols encountered on a daily basis sometimes lend themselves to adaptation for magical purposes. Note that a personal symbol set need not always consist only of written characters. Some sorcerers consider the set of representative motions, sounds, and even emotional states used during ritual workings to be part of their alphabets. Ultimately, using whatever methods to bring more energy and will to bear on a desire, the greater the chance that the desire will manifest. Intense visualization of the desired results coming to pass is another way in which this can be accomplished. Don't visualize this situation as being in the future. Embrace it as already occurring in the present, as the way that things already are. Reflect this in attitude and especially in speech. This is an ancient technique which can be found in Egyptian magical writings, some of which date back to the 2nd century before the Common Era, and that's Laurel Holmstorm, 1998. And that's my dog getting fed in the background, sorry about that. The stronger the image that is constructed of the reality desired, the easier it becomes to realize that reality. Another similar method that I have personally used is to write future journal entries, which contain references to events that I wish to occur as if they have already come to pass. In this process, I jump ahead a few weeks, months, or even years and write with conviction about the successes that I have had in various endeavors. This method has also been explored in a far more in-depth manner in the form of personal hyperfictions created by magician writers such as William S. Burroughs and more recently Grant Morrison. Attuning the self in as many ways as possible with the reality that is desired to be manifest is essential. It is no accident that the conscientious reality stands in the way of the manifestation of personal will. As individuals mature within a culture, they are expected to subscribe to and in fact assist in the reinforcement of the consensus reality of that culture. This generally includes accepting the dominant spiritual paradigm. Failure to participate as expected can result in sanctions such as shunning or imprisonment. Acceptance of external definitions of what constitutes the difference between real and unreal contribute to the creation and reinforcement of what Peter Carroll refers as the psychic censor, and that's Peter Carroll, 1987. The psychic censor. The psychic censor is a mechanism of the conscious mind which determines based on rules which have been internalized from external sources. What limits are placed on possibility in general and psychic censor? In general, the psychic censor tells the consensus mind that magic is a fallacy and that the power of the mind is insufficient to cause actual change in the universe. It also acts as a filter which limits sensory and extrasensory input. As much of a hindrance to the practice of magic that this construct sounds, it's also necessary. Without this filter mechanism, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to function on a daily basis, as the conscious mind would be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of input to which it would be exposed, as H.P. Lovecraft alluded. This censor also protects mankind from the shrieking horror of realizing how minuscule and imperiled our place in the universe is. Fortunately, there are a number of ways by which the censor can be overcome on a temporary or limited basis, without permanently impairing its functionality. One of these methods, and probably the most frequently employed, is to ascribe the source of magical power to a higher being, such as a god or demon. This placates the censor by inactivating the self as the causal agent. The desire is passed to the supposed higher entity via prayer or evocation. Unfortunately, this method is logically fallible as it requires an even greater suspension of disbelief and the adoption of a larger complex of assumptions than simply accepting that the self is capable of direct action. Because of this, I don't recommend its use. Another way to suppress and avoid the psychic censor effect is by allowing the desire for change to be passed off from the conscious mind to the subconscious mind. Many sorcerers rely on methods such as sigillization, glossolalia, the vocalization of nonsensical sounds and phrases, or other methods which compress the linguistic construction of the desire into a symbolic form, which can be better actualized by the subconscious mind. This method is generally effective but relies on the concept of avoiding a lustful result. If the sorcerer is unable to expunge the desire from the conscious mind, then the psychic censor can be activated and will sabotage the desire with disbelief, guilt, or other undesired processes. I propose that rather than trying to work around the psychic censor, there is a greater benefit in conditioning it through various methods so that it accepts a greater range of possibilities and no longer inhibits its belief in the self's ability to cause change to phenomenal reality. Such an endeavour should not be undertaken lightly, for there are risks involved in altering one's personal reality construct. There is no foil sticker on the subconscious mind which states warranty void if seal is broken, but it is a good idea to act as if there is. The goal in this conditioning is to allow the self a greater degree of freedom without losing grip on consensus reality. Why does this matter? The vast majority of sorcerers, myself included, must still be able to successfully interact with the real world at large, regardless of what our opinions on it may be. Remember that when the ritual is over and the circle is dispelled, that the Magister Templi still probably has to pump his own gasoline. As I discuss later, the practice of sorcery already necessitates at least some degree of egotism, but lapsing into solipsism, or the belief that the self is the only reality, is a trap that must be avoided. Such a point of view is interesting as an exercise, but the neurosis, paranoia and megalomania which can accompany it will probably provide few benefits. There are a number of ways in which the psychic censor can be conditioned. Some of these involve a greater degree of risk than others. Several methods, such as self-hypnosis and meditation, rely on some form of conscious conditioning, continually repeated with the intent that such behavior will over time reshape the process of the censor. Another possible method is loosely based on the theory of memetics. Memes are analogues to genes and are the replicators of cultural imitation and information, first proposed by the biologist Richard Dawkins. That's Richard Dawkins, 1976. They're comprised of both conscious and subconscious components, and thus they are capable of effectively bridging the gap between these parts of the mind as part of their very nature. The concept of the psychic censor seems based upon the assumption that an implanted thought process cannot pass harmoniously between the two segments of the mind without interference, and that the conscious ego will hamper the functionality of the thought becoming reality. Memes can counteract this effect by acting as tunnels which allow conscious thought to reinforce implanted subconscious programs. Consider the meme dogmatic faith, for example. A mind that is infected by this meme will have numerous patterns of behavior that are implanted in each segment of the mind. Each aspect of the mind acts to validate and reinforce patterns presented in order to facilitate a greater degree of acceptance of the message. To take advantage of this method of conditioning, create a self-directed set of sensory components, including sounds, visual, images, etc., as triggers, which are directed at encoding a statement of will. I will discard my preconceived notions regarding the structure of reality. Would be an example of such a statement. Repeated encounters with the trigger images, sounds, or phrases associated with this statement of intent can cause the idea of eventually penetrate into the subconscious mind. By definition, the informational packet created by this method is not actually a meme, unless the sorcerer chooses to disseminate the idea to others, but the process by which the mind accepts the message will be very similar. This method may seem odd, but it can work very effectively. It is an advertising campaign designed to sell the idea of power over the self to the self. If feasible, this campaign can be opened up for exposure to others as well, so that their collective intent contributes to the operation. Some of the most potent methods of overcoming the censor are also potentially the riskiest. Those include the techniques investigated by researchers such as Dr. John Lilly and Terence McKenna, which imply psychotropic substances such as LSD or psilocybin mushrooms to expand the mind and embrace alternative paradigms which remain even after the experience has ended. Lilly referred to this process as meta-programming, and that's John C. Lilly, 1972. He theorized that the human mind is a biocomputer, and thus the human beings are programmable entities. He sought to create a meta-programming language by which a person could better refine and control their own meta-programs, and hence gain a greater degree of control over both their conscious and subconscious processes. He performed a series of experiments in which he would adopt a set of basic beliefs, ingest LSD, and attempt to determine what level of intensity in those beliefs could be achieved. Terence McKenna also investigated the possibility of removing the barrier between what he terms the ego and the overself, and that's Terence McKenna from 1984. Unlike Lilly, his experiments were done using naturally occurring sources of tryptamine such as psilocybin, mushroom, and ayahuasca, a psychoactive preparation of the Amazonian vine Banistereopsis caapi. Experimentation with this technique is obviously not recommended for novices. McKenna himself states, naturally, whenever a compound is introduced into the body, one must exercise caution and be well informed with regards to possible side effects. Professional psychedelic investigators are aware of these factors and have freely acknowledged that the obligation to be well informed is of primary importance. That's Terence McKenna again. I have no doubt that many otherwise open-minded people recoil at the thought of using psychotropic substances as a means to modify their personal parameters of reality. As technologist and psychonaut Mark Hesse observed, shortcuts to gnosis invariably draw the ire of those who have tirelessly sacrificed to revive the same benefits as those bestowed by pineal grace. And that's Mark Hesse, 2000. While I am neither advocating nor condemning this practice, dismissing any method which has the capability to expand personal consciousness should not be done without consideration. Ultimately, each individual must rely on their own best judgment, weighing awareness of personal limitations and willingness to engage in activities deemed unlawful by civic authorities before reaching an informed decision. The degree to which any of these techniques or combinations are effective in conjunction with the conditioning the subconscious mind varies based on a number of factors. Quite simply, some people have an easier time changing their behavior patterns, belief structures, and subconscious programming than others. A brutally honest self-assessment of personal beliefs, attitudes, and limitations may be the best way to begin such a process. While any of the above methods are relaxing and psychic sensor may be employed in quantum sorcery, this system also relies on an awareness of acceptance of the principles of quantum mechanics and chaos theory to facilitate its workings. This is accomplished by understanding that at a subatomic level, physical reality itself is reduced to a field of probabilities, which can be manipulated by the mere act of observation, and that minute changes to momentum and trajectory of subatomic particles can propagate to cause far greater physical effects in the phenomenal universe. Reducing the scale at which the influence needs to be applied in order to produce desired results further helps to convince the conscious mind that such ends are attainable. This takes advantage of the dogmatic instruction of scientific principles common in Western educational systems, as well as the reduced subconscious resistance to incorporating new components which fall within the realm of science which is installed by such education. Whether or not the mechanism by which magic causes change is actually related to these theories is immaterial. It is the possibility that these principles are the causal force which frees the mind to believe that they are the cause. These theories and their implications will be introduced and discussed in subsequent chapters. The Egotism of Sorcery. There is an inherent degree of egotism necessary to practice sorcery. Not only must a person sincerely believe that he or she has the capability to alter reality by exerting will upon it, but he or she must also seize the prerogative and actually do it. Such temerity flies in the face of social conventions, as well as any religious faith which espouses the belief that everything in existence is part of some deity's grand plan. It is this willingness to venture outside of the boundaries of consensus reality and to strive for personal actualization which causes sorcerers to be labelled and in some times and places condemned to death as heretics, lunatics or diabolists. To be a sorcerer is to be outside of the boundaries of society while still being constrained to follow the rules when interacting with it. As I touched on briefly before, society thrives on homogeneity and gives only limited leeway to those who flaunt its rules and disregard its hierarchies. In a world where the opinions and recommendations of a single authority figure, such as a law enforcement officer or a psychotherapist, can have profound and lifelong effects upon the freedom and rights of an individual, there is much to be gained and by learning how to function incognito when necessary. This is not to say that a sorcerer must live a life of fear and concealment, nor does this mean that freedom of expression or personal style must be suppressed. What it does mean is that a profound awareness of society at large should be cultivated, as well as an understanding of just how far of a deviation from the norm will be tolerated within it before someone is labelled a threat. Power can be used to radiate confidence and competence, and if all else fails, manipulating the perceptions of others when necessary is a skill worth developing. Summary. Sorcery is a tool through which intent is focused in order to manifest results. It is not dependent on any particular set of beliefs or techniques, Although physical objects and symbols are useful in assisting a sorcerer with this task, they are not essential. Energy, in the literal sense of the capability to perform work, is one way of representing focused intent. By using laws of physics and thermodynamics and analogies for understanding how energy can be lost during its use, such loss can be counteracted or at least minimized. Barriers such as the inertia or external consensus reality, as well as the internal psychic sensor, must be overcome in order to exert will effectively. There are a number of methods through which the psychic sensor can be temporarily circumvented, but I propose that exerting control over it and conditioning it to be more permissive while still acting in an adequate filter to prevent the sorcerer from being overwhelmed by stimulus is more effective. You can accomplish this reprogramming in a number of ways, including pseudometric, self-conditioning, and self-metaprogramming through the use of psychotropic substances. In addition to these possibilities, quantum sorcery exploits the rigid system of scientific education and the implanted predisposition toward accepting and internalizing concepts which are presented under the auspices of science to introduce ideas which the censor might otherwise reject. Although there is an inherent level egotism necessary for working sorcery, there is also a need to interact successfully with the mundane world. A cultivated awareness of just how far from the norm will be tolerated by society before labeling an individual as dangerous to its structure can be of great benefit. So far, I've introduced some of the principles of sorcery and presented a few practical concepts which can serve as a framework for what is to come. Now it's time to consider the physical forces and reality models that quantum sorcery draws upon. Right, that's the end of chapter 2. I'm pretty sure that's gone on for way over an hour. Thank you very much for watching, if you made it this far. I will be doing chapter 3 very, very soon, hopefully with a few less traffic sounds, dogs barking and bird noises in the background. I edited out quite a few sirens and all sorts of other noises. The airplane's helicopter going over, I missed that one. So I've already taken some stuff out. So yeah, let's see how chapter 3 goes. I'll be back soon.